Hey everyone, it's your girl Maddie here, aka Beavermosh, and today I am joined by Avinash and Tom of Hands of Goro, who just released their self-titled album, Hands of Goro. Thank you so much for being here. How are we doing tonight?
Doing awesome. Thanks for having us, Maddie.
Yeah, like Avinash said, we're very happy to be here and we're doing good today. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get right into talking about the music because you play this classic heavy metal sound, very inspired by like the album era. And I'm wondering, and I'm asking this kind of as a hypothetical, as pretending like I'm not someone who's not already like immersed and into this music, because I get it, but why do you think there has been a resurgence in the interest in this particular, brand of metal, what some are calling the new wave of traditional heavy metal?
You can go first, Avinash.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting to know that because it does feel like there's kind of a big surge going on, and I feel like the first time that we really started to see efforts being made that way were those like Frost and Fire festivals. I don't know if you ever got to attend any of those, Maddie.
I have
Uh,
not, no.
yeah, they were put on in Ventura, California by the folks in Night Demon, and they got Sarah Dunkel back.
Yeah.
But ever since like that whole thing happened, like making people aware, it's like, hey, there are these bands all over America and all over the world that are doing these cool things.
Hmm.
People have had to go do that. And now we have Hell's Heroes, we have Blades of Steel, Legions of Metal, whatever. And I don't know. I think it took like kind of an effort to be like, hey, this music is cool. Like, it can be 2024 and you can make melodic heavy metal that just so happens to sound like new wave British heavy metal.
Yeah.
They just kind of needed a kick in the butt that you can do that music. You don't have to growl anything. Like, you can let the songs groove out and have a little more feel rather than just blast away all the time, which
Hmm.
has its time and place and it's awesome. But yeah, and I don't know, it just feels like making more and more people aware of that kind of style and being like, hey, like we can do this and it can be awesome and you can make some great tunes out of it. So I don't know, it feels like kind of an organic thing to me, just like, and it probably seems kind of fresh in comparison to like all the death and black metal that's been going around like the late 2000s and early
Of
2010s.
course.
Yeah, a lot of melodic vocal rock is pretty much horrible radio butt rock that you'd get at like Rocklahoma and stuff as well. And
Hmm.
we don't need that kind of negativity in our lives.
Yeah.
But it's interesting hearing Avinash saying that he thinks that this is like a new wave because I'm old enough to have been part of the first new wave of traditional heavy metal, like in about 2008. That's when
Hmm.
like bands like Enforcer and White Wizard were leading the charge. I was in one called Crowning Glory in the UK. And I remember we ended up on an Earache Records compilation, which was called Heavy Metal Killers. Literally, like the front cover looked like the cover of Killers by Iron Maiden with just a silhouetted guy waving a British flag. And we were like, I think there was only like one British band on it. It was all like European and
Yeah.
American bands. But yeah, I mean, I think the reason that this weird little corner of metal still exists, and perhaps why people are enjoying it right now, is that it's not so much the sound, I think, but the spirit of the new wave of British heavy metal. Like the new wave of British heavy metal was forged in hard times in the UK. It
Sure.
was like people were struggling, cost of living was through the roof. There was a lot of unemployment. There was a lot of kind of existential dread, and that stuff has not gone away. Like, if anything, we've got it just as bad now. And I think something like it's the fact that the bands at that time, it was all very DIY for a start. There was like no money. These weren't like record label bands. This was bands doing it just because they wanted something to do with their friends. They knew it was possible that they could get like a 7 inch out or something. And now we don't need that. We got YouTube, Bandcamp, all that kind of thing. Like, even if there's not a lot of local opportunities, the internet gives these bands an opportunity to have an audience. And I feel like the influences of a lot of those bands weren't straight down the middle. Like Judas Priest weren't trying to sound like Judas Priest. They were a combination of all of the great music that they enjoyed and all of the different new wave of British heavy metal bands, that the ones that have endured, like Saxon, Diamond Head, Iron Maiden,
Hmm.
Angel Witch, they all had their own unique take on like it was like distilling their record collections into like this is the stuff we like, so that's what we're going to play. And a lot of that 70s stuff, a lot of people have still got a lot of love for it. So I think it's possible, and indeed it's happening, that you get all these bands coming together who are still coming off that same old pot of influences that those old bands were, plus the stuff that those bands built upon it. I think that's what it is. Like there are some bands, I don't want to name any names, but I think some are a bit more into kind of like the hero worship and just copying the successful bands. Like it's perfectly possible to hear a band that's like, oh yeah, they're doing the Maiden thing or they're doing the Priest thing. What I love about our band is that I think we're not. Like we're just going like, hey, anything we think is cool, we're throwing it in. Like it's going on the record. Like there's no real barriers to what we're allowed to do.
Yeah, and some of the bands you've already mentioned, like Enforcer, Night Demon, Skullfist, Riot City, Traveler, I can go on and on, but like what I think people are latching on to these bands is yes, they do kind of adopt a more traditional style of metal, but it doesn't sound like it just, a tribute band, right? They are sounding fresh and new, and they are bringing new ideas to it. They're just kind of bringing back an old approach and kind of making it more contemporary in kind of the delivery.
Definitely. I mean, we got like more modern guitar tones, more modern production. The fact that we can all make like a more technically, like from a production point of view, accomplished record on a laptop now than those guys could in the kind of studios that they were going to in the original wave of this kind of
Mhm.
music. Like I think it's a cool blueprint, like for like or just a place for a band to start from. It's like we're going to exist in this universe where like these are the gods and this is what's happened before. And, like we're trying to think of like more songs that people can add to their record collections that they like just as much as like, Killers or The Sentinel or like Ace of
Mhm.
Spades if you're gonna try and go that big.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. When you think about, like Angel Witch or Satan or, bands of that, direct new wave of British heavy metal scene, they didn't have access to this. They just made records and somehow made some of like the most influential pieces of heavy metal history. It's wild.
It's
Yeah.
insane, isn't it? You
Yeah.
listen to the first Angel Witch record now and think that these guys were like, in their late teens, early 20s doing that stuff, not really probably knowing what they were doing. It's like I don't think many of them have been in the studio much before. It's insane what they came up with.
Mhm.
Yeah, and even the producers and the engineers, like they didn't know how to handle that kind of music. They didn't know how to handle guitar tones with that much gain, like drums with double bass at that speed. Yeah, there was or even how to fit the bass guitar into all that. Like that was an art that hadn't been really figured out yet. And now we kind of have the benefit of that. Like, all the Andy Wallaces, the folks that worked on Rain and Blood at MC
Yeah.
over there. They, they kind of cracked the code, so to speak, on how to record rip-it heavy metal. And now we can take that and apply it to, again, music in the style and kind of present it in a more clear or, I guess, flattering way for
Sure.
performances. And yeah,
That first Angel Witch record, even listening to it now, it's a weird record. And I don't know, like when they must have heard that, those producers, I mean, it's like it's heavy, but it's also kind of quirky and psychedelic, and there's just nothing really at the time, and it still kind of sounds like a totally unique piece of work.
Yeah, it's unhinged. Like the stuff that Kevin was doing with the guitars back then, like the layering and the interplay between those guitars, because they were a one guitar band, like he's a huge, huge inspiration for me, Kevin Hayborn.
Hmm.
Like you just got to listen to the first Angel Witch record. It's like for all of that to come out of him, that executed that well, that creatively at that age, like that's still inspiring to me now, even if it's like 40 something years since the
Yeah.
album came out. It still jumps out the speakers and scares you.
Hmm. And it never really, it's still kind of sadly a cult classic. Like it never really got the like commercial acclaim that like that, like a Saxon or a Diamond Head or a Maiden got, but it's still beloved by people that are in the know of heavy metal.
Big
totally.
time.
Yeah.
And
Well,
early
especially here in the Bay Area, like Avinash can probably speak to it more than me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to mention. Here in the Bay Area where Tom and Adrian and I all live, we actually had like one Angel, which was beloved by a lot of those folks in the early thrash metal scene, like at the Exoduses and Metallicas and the Death Angels and all that.
Yeah.
So much so that Kevin Hayborn spent a little bit of time in San Francisco,
Oh wow.
sort of formed another lineup of Angel Witch with members from Exodus and Heathen, etc. And they made some demos. I don't think they actually recorded full length, but they made some
No.
demos and even moved to Germany at some point. There was a whole crazy thing that Tom probably even knows some of the finer details of better, but here especially Angel Witch casts like a really really long shadow where you see their influence everywhere. I mean, not just Tom in particular who played an Angel Witch, but again, so many of the musicians around here, like they're gods,
Yeah.
straight up.
That's actually some Angel Witch trivia that I was not privy to. So thank you for
Oh yeah, cool. There's plenty
that.
more. We can take that offline.
Yeah. Well, So you all have experiences in different bands. Now I know you're all in the Bay Area, but what exactly brought, the trio of you together to form this project?
Well, the project formed originally with me and Adrian, the singer. I moved to the Bay Area in about 2014. Adrian had been here a lot longer. He joined Slough in like 2000 or something. So I went to a Slough concert as a fan of the band, got there very
Mhm.
early, and Adrian was the guy at the merch. So I bought a Traveller t-shirt and I spoke to him a little bit and watched the show, spoke to him again at the end and said, "Hey, I used to be an Angel Witch. I'm a guitar player. If you ever need someone for like a project, like this is my phone and my email and like call me." And he was like, "Yeah, cool, man." And then he didn't for like a year. But then Adrian's the kind of guy where if someone phones him up and says, like, "Hey, can your band take this gig on this day?" If his band can't make it, he won't say no. He'll say yes and create a new band specially. And that's what he did. That is what he did for Hands of Goro. I think he made up the name on the spot when the guy was like, "Okay, has your band got a name?" It's like that bit in Wayne's World 2 where like they're looking around the studio going, "An old man fashioning a kayak out of a log." Like I think he must have been looking at a Mortal Kombat thing or something because that's how it happened. Yeah, and then he emailed me. We got together with a drummer, jammed out like twice, and then did the gig. And we were like, "Oh, this is cool. We should carry on." Couple of lineup changes over the years, and during the COVID pandemic, when none of our other bands could play and we weren't really allowed to do anything like everyone else, Adrian and I decided to get together for a jam, and we didn't have a drummer. So I was thinking, who do I know who plays drums? Avinash plays drums. Avinash is an awesome dude. So Avinash came along. He listened to a couple of old recordings Hans Agoro had made, and I gave him a couple of covers to listen to so we could just have some things to play. And it sounded and felt good. So we were like, okay, same time next week. And it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, now granted, during that particular era of the world, same time next week was not as much of a guarantee as it is now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so, it could be one week, it's like, all right, cool, good to hang out with people, no problem, we'll mask up, it'll be all right. The week after, it could be, oh man, this is a dangerous thing, maybe we should lay back. And so we'd always make time, like, whenever we felt like it was safe to do so, and whether, like, we had the space to be able to get together. And so sometimes it was a couple weeks in a row, sometimes it was after a couple months. But every time it would always be good and fun and, and co by luck or by whatever it is, productive as well. And yeah, and we were able to kind of write the rest of the record. Like there was already a few songs that were already written and recorded, like Tom mentioned, but we were able to flesh out the ones that needed a little bit of extra TLC, and yeah, made an album out of it.
Oh yeah, and as you mentioned, and from what I understand, a couple of the tracks on the record go back all the way to the pandemic, and so now I'm wondering, you since then have added to kind of those initial, recordings of Hands of Goro. How long have you guys been sitting on a finished record for?
Oh, not that long. I mean, Adrian and I released an EP in 2018, like totally self-released. There was only like 200 CDs made, and we didn't put it on Spotify or anything.
Hmm.
And all of the songs on that we ended up re-recording for the full-length album Hands of Goro. So there's 5 songs on that existed before we ever jammed with Avinash, and then there's 3 songs that we added, which Avinash was fully involved in, like finishing and even starting from the beginning of some of those songs. Because 1 or 2 of them are kind of half written, and the others were completely new. And that all came together since 2020, like the last 3 songs.
Hmm.
And we've got one completely new one pretty much finished, which will be on the next album, which we're already starting to like conceptualize and figure out that we got to practice on Monday, where our plan is to go in with nothing and leave with a new song. Like that's the way we like to try and work.
That's a great goal.
It sometimes works. Like I remember there was
Yeah.
a point last October where we had like 2 shows in a month, and I said at the end of the first show, it's like, man, wouldn't it be great if we had a completely new song for the next gig? It's like it's in 10 days or something, and we managed it. Like it was not ready, but we played it.
I don't
Yeah.
even think I mean, Tom says not ready, but I don't even know if that much changed from the way we played it at first.
No, we just play it a bit better now, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, a
That's
bit more
Wasted
confident.
Blood, which did end up on the album, but that was purely like let's challenge ourselves to just have a new song in time for this gig that's like in a week and a half.
What's funny is that that particular tune, I think, ended up with some of that might be the quirkiest arrangement out of all the songs that ended up on that album. Like, there's one part that's like not even a straight time signature, like has a countdown. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, like the most amount of like kind of brain power required to work on that one, but that ended up being the song that came together both the fastest and yeah, and again, like the most complex.
the way you two are describing it, I'm kind of circling back to like my original question about why are people into this music, and I'm getting the sense that like yes, it's more melodic and tuneful than maybe some other forms of metal, but there's still this gritty DIY aspect that maybe comes from like punk rock or just other forms of heavy music. That's still very present in the DNA. It's still a very aggressive sound, even if it is anthemic and triumphant and melodic at times.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, what I
Yeah.
would say about all of us is none of us are like just metalheads. Like we all listen to all kinds of stuff. Like
Hmm.
Adrian's often listening to like, old jazz stuff and swing stuff, like acoustic. Oh God, I can't even begin to list all the stuff he listens to. Like it's Italian cinema, horror music, like you name it. It's the same with all of us. We've got just as much love for like a good like a nasty little grindcore riff as we have for like a section that sounds like Boston. But I think, especially because of me and Adrian's musical background, being on the stringed instruments, we've never spent much time in extreme metal bands. I only have like as a hired gun, and that was a pretty weird place for me to be, like with my musical tastes.
Yeah.
So like me and him are aware of it enough that we can dip into it, but like the stuff that's kind of more automatic for us is like the product of what we've done in all our previous bands. I've normally been in like rock bands rather than metal bands.
Hmm.
So it's always been like the idea of like the song with the ripping guitar solo rather than like this song has 15 riffs and 9 blast beats. Like, but we know what that stuff is and we can play it too. Like we have definitely got time for it, but we don't want to be a band that just does that. There's too many already, and they're probably going to be much better at it than us. Like we want to do what we're best at.
Oh my God, my job is to try to keep up with as much metal as possible. There's 50 of those records that you described coming out every week. There is yes, it is covered. There are so many.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of it's executed really well, but
Yeah.
I don't try and keep up with that side of metal at all. Like occasionally, something floats to the top, you'll hear about it, but there's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Maddie, alluding to what you talked about with the DIY spirit, a big part of that I think is in the Bay Area, things are so expensive, and we're always just trying to make our own things work. I think it's one part necessity, but also just kind of ingrained into the way we all approach music here. Like, if you go to our practice space in San Francisco, Adrian's built it out such that it's like you can record on a tape machine. He's got some outboard gear. Tom's got a setup at home to be able to track his guitars. I've got a whole suite of microphones and gear to be able to make records. It's just kind of one of those things where it's like, well, if we can do it and do a good job of it and have fun and it doesn't get stressful, then screw it. Why not? Like, it'll be a
Hell
good
yeah.
time. We'll be able to kind of be masters of our own destiny, so to speak.
Avinash is selling himself short here as well because he is a great engineer and like mixer and producer. He's been hired by plenty of bands to like make their records before. So having someone with that skill set and also the tools in the band is a tremendous, tremendous help.
Sure. Well, you keep, referencing where you're from, the Bay Area, and obviously a rich metal history. I mean, you think of the Metallica, the Exoduses, the Testament, so many other bands. It's crazy. Um, why do you think there is such a strong output of metal bands from the Bay Area, and why are the fans seem to gravitate it in that area of the States?
You know, it's really funny because back maybe 10 years ago, I used to be a bit of a blogger on like Invisible Oranges and whatnot.
Oh,
And
sure.
yeah, and I wrote a whole bunch of articles about the CD series of concerts called Lucifer's Hammer that happened in the late 90s. And Adrian was a big part of that, playing with Slough. And so we're like those bands like Ludacra and all that.
Hmm.
One thing that they all mentioned was that it's like San Francisco, for whatever reason, had this big spirit of like, if it's not there, we will make it happen. If we build it, people will come. And again, like, as far as the spirit of being like LGBTQ friendly and like anti-racism,
Yeah,
anti-fascism, like all these things that for whatever reason, like the San Francisco became the hotbed of and became a place where people who didn't fit in would go and feel welcome. Like, you'd be a freak in one town, but then you'd feel welcome here, or
sure.
be had the latitude to be yourself. And with extreme music, I think you find a lot of people that like, grew up feeling a certain way and like they're listening to something that, has death growls or has fast tempos like in punk rock or something like that. And maybe they're being made fun of it for like painting their fingernails black or like, dressing whatever, not like everyone else, and they find a place where it's like, wait, this is awesome. They find three other people that are like that too.
Hell
Let's
yeah.
form a band. Why not? And so it just so kind of happens. I think it snowballs, and that snowball happened to be here
Mhm.
in the Bay Area. And at least for me, it's like I can step out my door and go to like three different bars in Oakland where there's a whole bunch of other folks that like to listen to extreme music. Again, it doesn't have to be metal, or it could be punk. It could be like, I don't know, some wild ass like jazzy grindcore or something like that.
Yeah.
But it just always just felt like a welcome place, and I think it just keeps kind of getting exacerbated in like such a lovely, lovely, awesome way.
It's funny because I recently, a handful of months ago, had Layla from Vassum, who was an Oakland-based band, and I kind of asked the same question, and she answered it probably exactly the same as you. She's touched on a lot of those points. It just seems like it is this safe haven that the Bay Area seems to be for people that are into to maybe have a upbringing that attracts them to some of the more outskirts of art, and it works, and that's why metal had such a stomping grounds there.
Layla is so awesome. She actually lives like half a mile away from me.
Okay.
No, it's a thing. It just feels like family here. You walk around and you find other folks that are just as like loving and accepting, as open as you are, and you just
Mhm.
want to, and of course you want to be creative around that. And it just makes for this awesome metal kind of punk influence, whatever music that has got something a little bit extra and quirky going on that gives it that kind of unique flavor. I like to think Hands of Goro falls into that too. Wait, we're not death metal, but it's
No,
something.
absolutely. And tell me if I'm completely off base because I'm gonna assert this as an outsider, as a Midwesterner from Minneapolis who has just read about what has happened in California metal scene. But it seems like in LA was where glam was happening. There was a lot of excess. It was all like very commercialized, and the Bay Area was kind of more the kind of underground answer to what was going on to LA, and kind of as kind of birthed a lot of like ethos out of that.
I mean, that's why Metallica left LA and moved to the Bay Area.
Hmm.
Yeah, because they thought the LA scene was full of posers and no one really got them. And they went out to the Bay Area. I think they played a couple of gigs up there, and they're like, "Oh wait, this is where we need to be."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I
wasn't
think
Cliff in San Francisco when they kind of moved up to kind of recruit him? Is that was
that
correct, right?
that sounds right. Yeah, he was in El
Yeah.
Cerrito or something. Yeah, and they were like, "Yeah, they made the right move." But
Of
yeah,
course, yeah,
you think about like the whiskey and the rainbow and all of those like old rock and roll stories. It's like big hair and sex and
yeah.
drugs, and the Bay Area is like riffs and beer.
Yeah.
A
Beer big time.
lot of great riffs
I
from
mean,
us.
we're talking about this stuff, but we weren't there. Like I was
That's
born
right.
in I was born in '82, so like so a lot of the good stuff had already started happening then. Avinash is even younger. But like we're extremely invested in like helping continue that spirit and that music because it rules. Like when my wife and I left London to move here 10 years ago, there weren't many places on the planet I wanted to go instead of London. I loved it there. But I knew that the Bay Area had such an amazing musical history and that it was still going as well in the underground. Like, not necessarily a lot of big famous bands. Like, I mean, since High on Fire, I can't think of any bands who've been like bigger than them in the metal world who've come out of the Bay Area. And that's been a while now. On an underground level, it's insane. Like, I can't believe how many great musicians and bands there are here. It's just a beautiful thing. We love being part of it.
Hmm.
Now, on the other hand, and once again, as someone who is not from there, is kind of the stereotypes true that San Francisco has in a way been run over by the Silicon Valley tech bro kind of crowd?
That's the thing. Like Silicon Valley has existed in the Bay Area for decades at this
Yeah.
point. Like really it dates back to like the 70s even.
Okay.
Like, the Bay Area's been a hub for technology for so long now. And I don't know. I feel like the folks that like really want to stay here and be creative and build a community here, they find way to make it work. And yeah, it's true. There's plenty of folks that have been priced out that have chosen
Yeah.
to move to Portland or LA or wherever, what have you. But I don't know. I mean, granted, I also work in tech, so I can maybe I'm not want to talk. But yeah, it does seem like, things ebb and flow and change. Sometimes it feels like things are even more expensive here, or that maybe some folks are moving ladder quickly, but it always feels like there's a core, like a real strong creative
Yeah.
core of musicians and
Well,
artists that find a way to make it work here.
like just before we did this interview, Avinash and I drove over from the East Bay where we live to San Francisco to the Mission District, which is like the heart of San Francisco in a lot of ways. To this like old unit where Radio Valencia still broadcasts like a live radio show out there the entire time. And we had these two guys in there who they're continuing this thing called Rampage Radio, which first started in 1982. And we were in the studio with them for like 2 hours, just like talking shit and playing like vinyl records and stuff. The door was open, so people on the street are walking past and they can hear all this crazy noise coming out. And that's the thing. Like, sure, we've got these gigantic new skyscrapers full of tech companies that weren't even there when I moved here, but stuff like that is still here. It's just like it's under the surface, and
Yeah,
it's clinging on with its fingernails, but it's still there.
and I want to make clear, I have no problem with tech. I'm going into it myself, but I'm just kind of referring to like the whole gentrification side of it, obviously.
Oh God, yeah. Like
Uh,
the downtown is a mess, and the property prices are absolutely insane. Everything costs too much. Like a lot of people who used to live in San Francisco got priced out in the last 10 or 20 years and moved over to Oakland, and a lot of them are now getting priced out of Oakland because that's getting gentrified as well.
and where are the Oaklandites going?
Like out further than where I am, which is like 20 miles inland, they're going to like yeah, like places where it doesn't rain. Like just like the Californian desert starts happening, really. Like, not so much desert, but like hot, arid, not great place to exist if you don't like it being 110 degrees outside 200 days a year.
Well, I wanted to talk about the actual recording process because it's interesting from what I've seen. Is like you took the drums and the guitars and recorded it in like a naval base. You want to tell me about this?
Yeah, okay. So we're this is a pretty interesting part of the SF Bay Area that this happened in. There's an island called Alameda, and
Alameda.
Alameda. And on this island, actually a chunk of the island is an abandoned World War II naval base.
Wow. Okay.
And so at my job, I work at a warehouse on said base. And during the pandemic, for a variety of reasons, they gave me 24-hour access and like a whole bunch of space to get into all sorts of crazy stuff there. So I built a recording studio in like like a little office that, people used to work in, but because they got cleared out during the pandemic, they were all working at home. So I built out, set up my drums there, treated the room with some acoustic treatment. We set up the cabs there. And one night during 2021, September 2021, Tom and Adrian and I went in there. And we tracked down basic tracks to be able to get drums. And that ended up being, let's see, Uncanny, Prince of Shokan, 21st Century Plague, and Archduke of Fear.
That's right.
And yeah, we did that in one session. And then for the guitars, what we did was Tom recorded directly into his computer at home, getting what we call a DI track, a direct input. And I was able to take those files, send them out of my computer into a real, Marshall amplifier and through a pedal board, of course, mic that up, and that goes back into my computer. That's processed.
So cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It was so loud as well. It was amazing. We were at the other end of the warehouse. We could just hear it echoing through this gigantic building. We're like, oh my God, this is cool.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And yeah, I just let it rip. And we got to get some cool warehouse acoustics, both for the drums and for the guitars. Like, I think, one thing I'm pretty proud of with the guitar tones there, it's not just like this in your face, like close mic thing. The majority of the guitar sound on that is actually the room mic that I put up a few feet away from the cab. And yeah, and so I think that warehouse you can kind of hear the character of the room, and again, both the drums and guitars, especially all throughout the entire record.
There's just something about recording loud music in an abandoned warehouse that just screams metal. Like that is what that is. Like that's amazing.
The stars aligned on that one. We're very lucky that Avinash's employers liked him enough to let him do all this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very lucky on that one. The other, well, what's cool is that with the bass and vocals, we recorded that in a completely different setting. We recorded that at Adrian's practice space where we jam in San Francisco. And that one has got such a different vibe where he's made it super homey and cozy. Like there's cool lights everywhere, and there's a bunch of outboard gear, a tape machine, and we
Beer
set it up
fridge.
so that we could like crack open a few drinks and just chill and hang out and watch Adrian do his thing and make all the suggestions we wanted kind of live and on the spot. And it'd be like, hey, let's try doubling that here. Tom, why don't you try jumping down to harmony there? Or like we'd set up a mic that all three of us would surround. I'd hit record, run over there, and like we'd all do kind of gang vocals in a few sections.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made for what I'm very, very confident and happy to say is the most fun record I've ever, what do you call it, engineered, been part of, whatever. It's every session was just the most fun night of whatever week or month that we'd get together, for me at least.
I felt like it was done in exactly the same spirit that like my first bands tried to do recordings in when we were like 16 or 17, except like we can play and we can make it sound good. We had so many sessions that sounded so bad. I'm glad no one ever heard them like when I was younger, but it was exactly the same excitement and like,
Yeah.
almost the same method of working as well. Like, especially like Avinash is talking like, or like someone hitting record, then running over and like we're not having enough headphones for everyone. So they're waiting for someone to go now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Now I am so glad and happy that we have the technology and the software and the computing gear for people to like do like democratize music, and people can record in their apartments and send files to each other and create music that way. And it's a totally valid way to create it. But
hmm.
I also now kind of love hearing stories like this because it kind of brings like the old days of people just completely innovating and trying new ways to create music and having interesting effects out of it, you know?
I think it's a way that traditionally we've all wanted to work. Like it doesn't always work like that with every band, especially because our songwriting process is kind of in the same sort of vibe. Like it all happens in the room. Like we're not emailing riff ideas to each other. Like the only time we ever do any writing is all three of us in the room together. And like we'll record like what we played as a voice memo on a phone, and then like we'll listen to that before our next practice to like remember how it went. And then two or three times of doing that, we've pretty much got a song ready to play live,
Yeah.
which is awesome. It's how bands used to have to work. They didn't have a choice. And I think it forces it to be us, like completely us. It's not like we're a band and like four of the songs are written by that guy and two of the songs are written by that guy and that guy wrote a song as well. Like it's like no, we write the songs and like it's like everything we do is like it's by committee. If all three of us aren't into it, it doesn't happen.
Yep. And on when Tom was talking about like the phone recordings, you'll see where I'm going with this. So there was a Hulu series where it was Paul McCartney and Rick Rubin kind of going over old Beatles songs and old
Mhm.
Mm.
songs like Wing songs. He mentions that in those days when they couldn't record songs in the room, they had to write songs that were so memorable that they'd memorize it. if they if they forgot it the next week when they got
Yeah.
together, clearly it wasn't good enough because they couldn't remember it, right? And so we making these like phone voice memo recordings where we can sort of hear what's going on, but
Yeah.
like not completely. And it kind of falls on us to just be like, okay, this section was rad, then we're gonna feel it in our bones and feel it in our hearts and minds. And it's one of those things where I've never had this with any other band that I've ever played in before, where we, because of life, because of say job situations or touring or whatever, we may not be able to get together for 2-3 months and we can bust out these songs like no problem, and we're just like, oh yeah, we just know these things. And even new songs, like we have a new song that we wrote in a couple practices called Show Can Bolts, where it's got again another wild arrangement, like a whole crazy middle section. There's even a little blast beat in there, all sorts of stuff.
Mhm.
But we don't even have that many very good recordings of it, but we made it memorable enough to where it's like, oh yeah, it's that part. Oh, it's like that's gonna happen here. Okay, now I know I need to do that. And it just feels intuitive and I don't know, hopefully good enough to where that if we can memorize by heart, then other people will latch onto it too. I don't know. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
The middle bit confused the hell out of a lot of people when we played it a couple of weeks ago live. I can say that, so I think it's working.
Sick. This is totally off topic and off the wall, but the first thing that I thought of when you mentioned that Hulu series with Rick Rubin and Paul McCartney is one of my favorite YouTube videos memes. It's a clip from that, but they replaced all the music with a Cannibal Corpse track, and Paul McCartney will just like bob his head and make comments to like the most disgusting death metal. It's just so funny, and If you haven't seen it, it's worth a watch. Anyway.
I have
Um,
seen that. You're right. It's amazing.
yeah. Well, I you self-released this record, and as musicians who have been involved in other projects that have gone the other way and have worked with labels, what do you find to be advantageous of going, the self-release route?
We're only in debt to ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a good start. We don't have to run anything by anyone. We're not too dependent on waiting for external things to happen.
Mhm.
It's all on us. I've definitely been in bands where like it's got to album release day and the label has forgotten to like put the videos live on YouTube or
Sure.
something. Or, like the Bandcamp pre-orders don't go out or something. Having 100% control of all of that stuff means that, we can do pretty much exactly what we want to. It's really, really nice being on your show. Thank you for having us because the main thing that perhaps we haven't got that a label might is just bigger reach.
Hmm.
Like we hired independent PR and we pressed the record ourselves and we paid for it to be mastered and we paid a girl to do the artwork. But otherwise, yeah, any other cost was just covered by us, like internally. So we're not in debt to anyone. We were able to get the record pressed extremely quickly, actually. I think from like
That's awesome.
submitting the order, we had it back in like 6 weeks or something, which was great.
Sounds right to me. Yeah, yeah. It was like we put in the order like early November or something like that, or October, and we got them in the mail like come first week of December or something.
And ultimately, as well, like a record label is great for physical product, but we're a
Mhm.
brand new band. Like we've pressed a number of records and we've still got left. But like we didn't need a label to press like 5,000 copies and send it all around the world because we're a
Yeah.
completely new band. We know exactly how many copies of the record exist right now, and when they sell out, we'll press some more. And we've already got people who are like trying to help us get it onto CD and like try and get overseas distribution, which is really good because that's the kind of thing that a record label, if we'd gone around looking for one beforehand, it might have been a hard sell. Like, okay, you've got like the names of the previous bands we've been in, but we are unknown. We've done like fewer than 10 shows. We want to do more. We want to get out on tour, but it's very, very crowded out there. And, for every one of us, there's like 100, 1,000 other bands who also want to be doing those kind of things.
And I've interviewed quite a few bands on various places on that spectrum. And a lot of the bands that like are on like, your prosthetics or
Hmm.
those type of labels, they did what you did. And they did just like self-release a record with like 5,000 copies that they ordered themselves. And then they decided, okay, we've made a name for ourselves. Let's go the record label record. And I don't know if that's what you're gonna do, but that is a thing that has happened with metal bands, quite a few times.
Definitely, man. Yeah, I mean, God, if someone like Metal Blade or something was interested in our second album, I don't think we'd have a very long conversation about it.
Yeah.
But for now, I think Adrian did even approach a couple of underground labels, perhaps ones he'd worked with before, and they were just like, yeah, we're not taking any more releases right now. And we wanted to just get this out there as well. As soon as you're beholden to a record company, you're beholden to the record company's schedule. And when they think they're best going to have resources available to promote the album. I'm in a band where we finished recording an album November of the previous year, and it didn't get released till August. Because like they wanted to press so many records, it was going to take this many months, and they didn't want to release it the same month as like too many other big releases they had going on. And we just get lost at the band the size of ours if we started getting put into those kind of considerations.
I've heard this exact, thing that you're saying from other bands that I've interviewed, and they're like, yeah, the reason the record's coming out now is because that's when the label wanted to put it out for because they thought that that's the best time that they were going to sell. And I don't have anything against labels. Labels are great. Labels have done a lot of great things for great bands, and there are a lot of great labels. But that is seems to be a clear disadvantage. That is just part of the business.
Yeah,
Yeah,
honestly, it is. Like I think, I think we've all got quite a bit of experience of being in bands and going through record release cycles, and we talked about it quite a bit, and we were all really happy with the plan we came up with, which was we'll self-finance everything, we'll get the artwork done, we will press the physical copies ourselves, and then the one missing piece was the PR guy, honestly.
Hmm.
Like that's the most important part. That's the thing that you would hope that a label really nails. But a label might have one PR guy working for like, you know, the entire label. It could be the entire roster, you know. Like by having a dedicated relationship with David Isblet, he's done amazing things for us. Like he has done single-handedly more than anyone else to get this band's name out there so far. I'm extremely grateful to him. He's done an amazing job. But that's
Yeah,
what we
and
think. Because because it's going to be every album gets released the same way now. Like it appears on Spotify. There's a couple of advanced tracks, and then like one day it's all there. So we're like, well, we can do that ourselves. Like Avinash just set up like a CD Baby account or something, and yeah, all our music's now on Spotify. Great. But lining up like the release dates and making sure that there was a nice press release to go out, like getting interviews lined up, that was the thing that made it like an album release rather than just like clicking upload.
I'll give you guys some insight here that maybe, bands don't hear as kind of from as a journalist side is like I I have thousands of unread emails in my inbox right now of bands trying to send me music. And it's not that I like am like trying to ignore them intentionally. It's just I literally cannot keep up with it. But when I see emails from, Dave from Earsplit or others that I've trusted, I know, okay, they want to get me good interviews. And like, of course, those are the ones that I have to prioritize opening, and your band being that. So yeah, I mean, a good PR representative does so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was that Avinash had the relationship there, so that was really good news because I was just Googling stuff going like, oh, I don't know, man. Like,
Yeah.
is a guy, is a agency that represents Pantera going to want to talk to us? I don't know. We're pretty small.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Earsplit and Dave and Liz in particular, like I've worked with them so much back when I was writing myself, when I was also a journalist,
Yeah.
and it's like curation in a way. It's like they work with artists that they genuinely enjoy, and it's not just the Panteras, but also like small bands like ours because one, they like the people, and two, they like the music too, hopefully,
Yeah.
and I don't know, that certainly went a long way for me when I was doing a lot of writing myself, just like you, Maddie, and it's like, wow, get an ear split band coming my way, but they're probably gonna be cool. They're probably gonna be all right, folks. Like I think, like I'm sure it'll be fun at the very least to write
Yeah.
about,
100%.
to chat with them. So that was one thing. Is just like, yeah, when we were thinking about people to work with, it's like, okay, like I want to work with people whose tastes I trust and who I like to work with, and hopefully they like me, and hopefully just I'll spread the love everywhere.
100%. 100%. It's those, especially in like our, kind of niche scene, like those connections, those names that you build a relationship with, it it means so much.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I know you have a record release show. Any other live dates on the calendar? Are you working through that? I know that's something you are wanting to do.
Yeah, well, the next month, Avinash and I are both going out on tours with different bands, so we're not going to be doing anything in April. But I think we have got a show in San Francisco in June, which we're still waiting to be told we're allowed to announce. I think the headliner is doing a tour, and they haven't announced that they're doing a tour yet. But that'll be like a little club show in San Francisco. We're reaching out to all our friends and other bands and promoters we know all over the place, going like, "Hey, we're ready to do shows now. Like, does anyone want to play with us?"
Yeah.
I guess like we're probably too small to have a booking agent on side now, but that's the next kind of thing we'd be hopefully looking at, like somebody who could like help get us on a tour or help book us a tour. Like we could completely DIY that, but I think we've all got enough experience to know that like we don't want to take days off work to like play somewhere we've never been on a Tuesday night when no one's there. Like we got to make it count. Like if we could
Mhm.
get like a weekend of gigs, we'll go to like LA or something. Like Adrian was talking earlier about like going over to the East Coast and trying to get like a run of 3 or 4 shows done. We'd love to go anywhere as long as we can, not lose too much money doing it, I think.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like as part of this whole effort, like Tom mentioned a bit earlier, we're a brand new band. And one, like, yeah, we've all played in other bands and stuff like that. But it's like when you're starting from scratch like that, people kind of gotta figure out who you are. And it's not as simple as like, oh, we are old school death metal, we are cosmic black metal.
Mhm.
Like, if Uada's coming through town, then they know who to hit up in Oakland. But for us, it's a bit more of a not a niche, but it's just different. And
Different,
I'll happily take pride in, but it also makes it a little more tricky as far as like bands who tour a lot and come through town and like when they want a local opener. And we kind of need to like establish ourselves within that whole crew, like say the Hellfires who are local here as well, or the Space Vacations, Slough-Egg, if we're
Yeah.
using them as an example.
Well, for our album release show, we ended up playing with two thrash bands, and we
Yep.
sounded nothing like either of them. Yeah, it was still a cool night. A lot of people came to watch the thrash bands, and they were very confused. Like at the beginning of our set, going, "Huh, this sounds a bit like Kiss or something. What are they doing?" But then it's sort of over the course of the set, when they saw how many different kinds of shit we're trying to do, they were like, "Okay, yeah, this rules." Like we sold a couple of albums, and made some new friends. So we're happy to be the weird band on the lineup. I think that's going to happen to us a lot.
That's kind of like when Alice in Chains, before Alice in Chains got big, opened up, I think, for like Megadeth and that tour.
Yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah.
well, wow. Imagine that.
All right. This is the last question I've written down, but I will save probably the hardest one for last.
Ooh.
Okay.
What's the best Iron Maiden album?
Oh, oh. Oh, Tom, do you have this one right? Oh, man. Tom is left. Oh, yes.
It's kind of the back in my, so I can only see the bottom of it. Ah, yes. Yes.
My background's being stupid. It's live
Yeah,
after.
yeah, live after death. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
I was
I think
just gonna ask if live albums could count, and if so, then that's the one.
Hmm.
yeah. Can live albums count?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Okay, yeah, it's that one then. Yeah, it's the classic
okay.
lineup. The classic lineup playing all the best shit. Like it even includes like a couple of Diana songs on side four, like Phantom of the Opera and stuff. Like, yeah, it's brilliant. It's amazing. I don't think Maiden on record have ever really nailed what's so magic about themselves. Like, not compared to what happens at their concerts. Live After Death for me is the closest.
The thing with Maiden is those first at least 7 records,
Mm.
an embarrassment of riches. Like, what in the
Yeah, I think
so
it's
much?
it's 2 words, Martin Birch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he
like I'm
produced
a
a
little
lot of
Eddie
my
right
favorite.
here.
There you go. Yeah, Martin Birch produced most of my favorite like rock and like old heavy metal albums, and that combination of him and Maiden is just yeah, absolutely untouchable. Did he do No Prayer for the Dying, Avinash?
Technically, he produced it and mixed it, but really it was engineered, I think, by Steve Harrison, some other guy, like in their
Oh,
house or something like that.
interesting.
Yeah,
'Cause
that
I
one.
would totally say that everything up to Seventh Son, like I would not want to live in a world without any of those albums.
Yeah. I think I don't think Somewhere in Time is underrated. I just think kind of gets buried underneath the other classics around it. I love that record.
Mm.
I'll throw in a dark horse and say Brave New World. At least like in like the modern day of Maiden is like one of my favorites.
Cool.
Obviously love Power Slave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brave New World was my first new Iron Maiden album. So like it came out in 2000. I'd like started listening to them like a year before maybe. So
Hmm.
suddenly it was like, oh wow, I love this band. Oh, but they don't play anymore. Oh, but Bruce is coming back. Oh, and they got new music. Like the first time I saw them live was in 2000, and they had Slayer and Entombed opening for them as like touring Brave New World. And God, like
That's
yeah,
so that I did not know that's a card.
it was a one-off show in London. It wasn't a tour. Like so, it's just this like in Earl's Court, this 20,000 like capacity giant
Yeah.
exhibition hall. Yeah, my God. Brave New World's definitely better than most of the albums that have come since, if not all of them. Yeah, I'm getting more and more angry with Iron Maiden albums the more come out. Like I don't think they're getting better.
I liked Book of Souls. I thought Senjutsu was pretty uneven and kind of boring. I don't like that it seems like their tour right now, which I will be at, seems to like emphasize those tracks, but
The Time
whatever.
Machine.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Um,
saw I saw that show at Hellfest last summer in France because I was over there with Spirit Adrift and we played like 12 hours before Iron Maiden. And what I will say is that it's worth it for the Summer in Time stuff that they play.
yeah.
But yeah, it almost feels like an intentional fuck you the way they structured the set list with some of those sentences.
I we're talking we're no we're going deep into like Iron Maiden's discography. I do in a way feel bad for Blaze Bailey because like obviously those Iron Maiden records nobody cares about them. They're not good. But he did get to sing for Iron Maiden for a few years, so I mean I don't feel that bad for him, but also like history's
Yeah,
not been too kind.
it's not all bad either. I mean, the
Yeah.
Klansman's still alive, so I think like that's become a Maiden classic.
Mhm.
You know, he was definitely part of that. But yeah, my God, like if they started throwing in more songs from Virtual Eleven and X Factor, I'm not sure too many people would be stoked about it.
Oop.
Have you two listened to the new Priest album yet?
Yes.
We were
Oh,
just talking about this last night.
it's oh my goodness. I mean, I've listened to it twice already now. I don't, so I need to sit with it. I don't know if I like it as much as Firepower. Firepower just kind of kicked everyone's asses when it came out, a handful of years ago. But it's good. Rob Halford sounds amazing. Kind of has some of those more painkiller kind of screech vocals brought back. It's heavy. It's probably heavier than Firepower. It's probably their heaviest record in a while. And I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed the hell out of it.
I would love to know like what bits were Glenn's and what bits were Richie's. Because there's some in the riffs in there a little bit. I feel like, oh, that could be a Glenn riff, but obviously with the situation, like it's kind of hard to tell. I think the guitar playing is incredible. Like Richie absolutely murders that album in cold blood with his playing. Like it's
Yeah.
hard to put it any other way. He's a brilliant guitar player. And yeah, for it's amazing that Halford has still got those screams in him. Like it's a really, really good performance from him too. I guess I would say that from a songwriting point of view, I think it starts very strong with all the songs that kind of sound like they're on Painkiller. Like it's a good look for Priest. I do like that part of them a lot. But I feel it starts to wash out a little bit towards the end. Like it probably doesn't need to be quite as long as it is. I'm a big fan of like the 40-minute rock album or the 45-minute rock album. When it starts getting over an hour, it's like, are you sure all of that needed to be on there?
That was kind of my thought. And like I said, I don't want to make a premature judgment, but it did seem like it was maybe a little overstuffed. They trimmed it a little bit because there are amazing choruses littered
Mm,
throughout that record, but then there seems to be like a couple tracks where I kind of lose my attention, where I'm not as into it as some of the other tracks, and that's kind of where I feel like, but it's still a very enjoyable record.
definitely. I think if you just pause at any second and think like, what I'm listening to right now sound like? Like, is it a good riff? Like, does it sound badass? The answer for the whole album is pretty much yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
What
Yeah,
do you think, Avinash?
yeah. So Priest they're probably my favorite band straight up, and Firepower I think is like absolutely up there with some of their best stuff. This one, it's just been a busy few days. So I haven't been able to give it the time and attention it deserves, but I listened through and I was like, huh, this one, both of y'all are saying, it's like you step back and you think, okay, that's pretty sick. Like you just look at it not under the microscope, but just like you just like think about it as like as kick-ass and metal. It's like, yeah, this is really, really good. But then as it's, if I'm kind of going like, oh, do I really, really dig this? Is this like a fully like kick-ass like song kind of thing? I'm kind of scratching my head and being like, all right, like do I remember how Sons of Thunder went after I listened to that one or Gates of Hell or something? And I just need to give it some more time. So far, it's not like hooking me and grabbing me like the throat that Firepower did. The
Mhm.
song Invincible Shield, I think, is outstanding. That one is just like, wow, like that's one of the most like kind of bloodthirsty songs I've heard out of them in a long, long time. But the rest, I need to sit down with it and give it the time and attention it deserves. Like Tom's saying, Richie's guitar playing is out of this world. It's awesome. And Rob's definitely pushing himself vocally way more than he has in like God, probably not since like Crucible solo album, like however many years ago, like 20 some odd years ago. And Scott Travis's drum patterns are super interesting. He's doing a lot more. He sounds like he's just kind of kicking a lot more butt here than he did since probably Painkiller or something. Yeah, it's good. It's objectively like good heavy metal, but it's after coming off of Firepower, it's just like when you come off a bar that high, it's like you kind of need to see how it stacks up against that. You're only as like every band I feel like is only as good as their best work or something, right? So
Well, like torn arteries after surgical steel.
yeah.
The the production I was really paying attention because I was walking to work and I had it on my headphones and I had, and just like the way the drums come out so clear while kind of matching the intensity of Rob's vocals and those heaviness of the riffs, and they're all kind of going, and none of it gets washed out. It all comes out crisp and clear while still being so heavy. That's not hard to pull off in like a mixing standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, who
Yeah.
the person who produced that album, Andy Sneap, like that guy's, like he's effectively kind of defined the sound of metal for the past like 25 years. Like if you think about like
Totally.
like all those thrash albums he's worked on, like even I think Killswitch Engage he might have been part of, like Megadeth.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, he's absolutely like he's up there with like Colin Richardson, with Andy Wallace, like if there's someone who knows how to do what you're describing, Maddie, like have the drums slice through like these high gain guitars and like these crazy piercing streams, it's 100% him.
Yeah, like the EMG guitar sound as well. Like it just became completely homogenous in the 2000s. After a while, like, if Andy Sneap hadn't produced an album, it'd be someone who was trying to produce an album like Andy Sneap. And it really, I mean, you think about what it did for Accept when their 2010 album came out. What was that one called? Blood of the Nations. I
Mhm.
just remember, like, because it was a Sneap production, it was really the first time I'd ever heard like that super modern metal production applied to like old school metal, and I loved it. And I think that's a cool thing that, it's become part of like the traditionalist metal wave now. It's like we're allowed to have these super heavy guitar sounds. If we want, we're allowed to have these like insane drums, like sounding like Scott Travis does on this. That's Priest have really got the best deal of that. They got incredible players and they got like the best producer in the game working on it.
That's interesting because I've actually thought about that recently, and I never really like was able to put like my tongue on it. But you described it perfectly. When I go back into those old Judas Priest records, and they're incredible, and the songwriting is there. The guitar tones are not as crunchy as heavy as some of the stuff they did later. And like, okay, yeah, it's that they didn't have the person behind the board, and it's sacrilegious, and I'm not saying that like I would prefer that, like, I don't know, those records uh came out later, but it would be interesting to hear what like some of the Stained Class tracks sound like, recorded with a bit more of a modern edge. Like, how heavy could that record get?
Well, I guess I had to go and see them live and find out
Yeah.
because it is kind of like their live sound, I think, isn't it? Like what they're going for on the record. Like Richie's guitar sound is what you'll hear on stage, I'm pretty sure.
Hmm.
And, it's really funny when you're talking about like, oh, Stay in Class or Stay Screaming for Vengeance or something like that. Like, a really close friend of mine is a recording engineer, and one thing she always says is, it's not the gears, it's the ears.
Sure.
So in this
Mm.
case, the gear, it's a Marshall amplifier, which we've had for decades. Like a JCM 800 is a 40-year-old guitar amplifier. So it's a Plexi
Hmm.
or a JMP or something like that. An SM57's been around since like the 60s or something like that. Andy Sneap is using a 57 on a Marshall amplifier. But whether it's EQ, whether it's tones, performance, or something like that, that's the person who knows how to get that kind of big, huge, fat sound out of it. It's the
Yeah.
same stuff. It's the same material goods, but it's the ears of the engineer and the producer and being able to coax it out of the fingers of the players, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Stay in Class, they probably had the same tools, honestly. Maybe they didn't have Pro Tools, maybe they couldn't nudge things into perfect time,
Yeah.
but you can't grid a chunky palm mute riff. You have to play that. And you
Yeah.
can't tell Pro Tools, hey, give me the most heaviest guitar tone ever. Pro Tools doesn't know what the hell heavy is. You gotta
No.
know how to get there as a producer and engineer. And in this case, it was Andy. And again, whoever, like, this is something that just took time and experience for engineers to figure out, like how to make metal sound as awesome as metal is.
Since we're talking about Priest and Avinash, you say you're a huge Priest fan. I gotta ask a divisive question. Turbo? Where do we stand on Turbo?
Okay, this is where I'm gonna go super nerdy on this. There was a reissue of Turbo that came out like 7 years ago or something like that, called like Turbo 30. It was the
Yes.
Turbo album. The two discs that were the bonus CDs were this like a live recording from the Turbo tour, and then they played like 6 out of the 9 songs on Turbo, or 7 out of the 9 songs on that disc. They sound 1,000 times better than the album versions.
Hmm.
Turbo, I think what that revealed to me is that the songs in Turbo are really killer, but it's not captured the way that the energy of those songs could deserve. And so, yeah, the studio album itself, I spin it once every now and again. Turbo Lover's awesome.
Yeah.
But and so is Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days, if I remember. Yeah, yeah, that one too. Reckless is cool. But Rock You All Around the World, that's another kind of weirdly dark one, even though the lyrics are all super positive.
Yes.
But yeah, live on that bonus Turbo live album or whatever, kicks ass. It's so, so good. And like that's like, oh shit, this is what this album could have been if it just
Sure.
been the right way back then.
I think it happened to a lot of bands in the 80s where they were using what was considered state-of-the-art equipment at the time, like all these new like guitar effects processors and stuff. Like I think it's really the guitars and the drums that give like the horribly dated sound to Turbo. But like in 1986, that shit was brand new. Like they were out in front of the pack. It's just very quickly everyone moved on from that stuff. So there's quite I can think of a few albums from the mid 80s that really suffer from that and like the in vogue like production techniques and stuff. But like Avinash says, like there's songs that in that set list that they still play Turbo Love alive.
Mhm.
They do.
Behind the production is definitely a well written, well executed album. It's just kind of hard to listen to.
So it's not my favorite Judas Priest album, but I do consider myself a bit of a Turbo apologist. Um, I Here's what I think Turbo is. I think it's the best hair metal record ever released. And that I think Judas Priest heard what was going on, didn't like it, but decided as a power move, as kind of just a bit to kind of take that sound and just kind of show what it could sound like in the hands of a band that like really cared about the music, was just not in it for what was going on in LA. And that's what I think Turbo was. And it was a bit. And I think the bit worked for me.
Wow, that's a cool way of looking at it. I'd never thought of it like that.
Yeah. Same thing where I think Painkiller was like, oh, you think Judas Priest is old, we're not as heavy as like, the Metallicas, the Slayers. No, actually, we could do it too, and we can do it really well.
Come out the
Totally.
gate smashing your face off of a drum solo, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, this has turned into a Judas Priest appreciation pod. This is cool.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we've been chatting for about an hour. Don't want to keep you too long. So, but before I let you go, I want to give the floor to you for any last words, any plugs, anything you want to leave my viewers with.
Avinash?
Um, I mean, other like, yeah, Maddie, thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the record, and hopefully other folks are enjoying the record too. We certainly had a really, really fun time making it, and certainly have a really fun time just being a band with these two. So yeah, as long as if other folks are like kind of getting like if they're able to kind of sense that joy and fun that we have doing this, and if our record's helping out with that, then I'm a happy camper.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I would say thanks for checking us out. Thanks for having us and, do what makes you feel happy, with the people you love. Like that's what we do with this band. We do stuff that makes us happy with people, with our friends who we love. Yeah. Go out and do it with your friends. Like make music, have good times. Like life's not a rehearsal. Like, you need to do this shit. I'm really glad we're doing it and I'm really glad that we're getting to share it with people now.
Hmm.
Yeah. Do that, make a band, or if you want to do that, you could start a YouTube channel, you could start a podcast, you could start a Z.
Yeah.
There's so many
Do,
things you could do.
do something. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Avinash, Tom, Hand of Goro, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I had a great time with this chat. And for everyone at home watching, my name is Maddie, aka Beaver Mosh. Keep it metal. Bye.
Cheers, Maddie. Thank you.